G'day, and welcome to the AOS Coach sneak peek into the Fury of the Deep battle box between the Idoneth Deepkin and the Fyreslayers that Games Workshop were kind enough to send to me in advance of its general release. Now, in this video, I'm going to highlight the key changes in the war scrolls that are featured in this battle box. So there are no allegiance abilities, there is no battle tome, there is purely just the war scrolls for the units in this box. So I'm going to show you the rules for the new heroes for both the Idoneth Deepkin and the Fyreslayers, as well as the new points for match play and some of the sneak peek into the lore. Now, within this box, there is no mention of allegiance abilities, battle tactics, battalions, or enhancements, so I can only assume that they will follow in a battle tome in the near future. I don't know when that's going to come out or if that's going to come out, so I can only put this into context to what we currently know. So let's dig into the good stuff and show you off what you're really wanting to see. Starting off with the Fyreslayers and their new hero, the Auric Flamekeeper. Now, the lore behind the Flamekeeper is its role is really to cremate the recently slain Fyreslayers and extract their all gold so it can be passed down to the next generation of warriors. Now, it starts off with a pretty generic Fyreslayer hero characteristic with a base move of 4, a 4-up save, bravery of 8, and 5 wounds. It doesn't have a shooting attack, and all of its attacks will happen through the melee profile, which is through the Brazier Axe, which is a range of 1, 4 attacks, hits on 3s, wounds on 3s, has rend -1, and deals 2 damage. The reason you're taking the Auric Flamekeeper isn't for its combat prowess, but rather for its ability, the Master Flame rune. And the way it works is when you set up this model, you place a d6 with a 1 facing up. So use a d6 or some form of counter token that is different to your wounds. Keep that in mind. Each time a friendly Fyreslayer's model is slain within 12 inches of the unit, you are going to increase the value on that dice by 1 to a maximum of 6. Now, once per turn at the start of the combat phase, when the value is at 6 and 6 only, you can draw from the power of the rune and pick one of these following abilities. And you apply the ability to one friendly Auric Hearthguard, Hearthguard Berserker, or Volkite Berserker that is wholly within 12 inches of this unit. So you've got 1 in 4 of these options, and once you apply this ability, the dice goes back to 1 and you start counting again. You can either give the unit a 6-up ward save, you can essentially apply Berserk Fury to a unit, which allows your model, when it's slain and it hasn't fought in combat yet, the model can fight before it's removed from play. You can get that unit to immediately charge, and remember, this is in the combat phase, not in your combat phase, so it means that you could charge with a unit that's currently not in combat and bring it into combat. Or you could add 1 to the damage characteristic of that unit's melee weapons. It's probably worth calling out as well that the Auric Flamekeeper is a totem, so any of the commands you are issuing from the Flamekeeper are going to have a greater range compared to a generic hero that isn't your general. There are war scroll updates to the Hearthguard Berserker, the Auric Hearthguard, and the Volkite Berserkers, all of these units featuring in the box. Now, there are a lot on the war scrolls, so I'm going to just call out the key changes as opposed to go through every single line item. So starting off with the Hearthguard Berserkers, their move, their save, their bravery, and their wounds all remain the same. So does the Broad Axe and the Pole Axe melee profile. So if you currently have the old Battle Tome, they are the same. The throwing axe have slightly improved. They were 5s and 5s. They are now hitting on 4s and wounding on 4s. Duty unto Death has changed, and it's now a flat 4-up ward save, but it does require you to have a Fyreslayer hero wholly within 9 inches instead of just being 10 inches like the old book. The other thing that you will notice is that in the old book, if you didn't have a hero within 10 inches, I think it was a flat 6-up ward, and you got a +2 boost if there was a hero nearby. You now just flat out lose the ward save in the new book if you don't have a Fyreslayer's hero wholly within 9 inches of the unit. The Smoldering Brazier still does 2 mortal wounds on an unmodified hit roll of 6 when you're using the Pole Axe, but otherwise not too many changes when it came to the Hearthguard Berserkers. Your Auric Hearthguard have become more brave, and they have seen a boost to their bravery that's now 8, and their movement, save, and wounds characteristics remain the same as the old War Scroll. The magma pipe shooting attack is the same, but the throwing axe change is consistent across the unit, so they too are going to benefit from their throwing axes hitting on 4s and wounding on 4s. In melee, your magma pipes have gained a rend -1, though the profile appears to remain the same otherwise with the hits and the wounds. There are two ability changes you'll want to take note of. First off, the Molten Rock Bolts has changed. The ability has been completely reworded, and now when you roll a 6 on those magma pipes, so if it's an unmodified hit roll of 6 in shooting, you subtract 1 from the target unit's movement characteristic. So you're essentially reducing the opponent's movement by 1 until the end of your opponent's next turn. Now, this ability cannot reduce the target's movement characteristic below half. The other ability that's changed is the Lost Sworn Protectors that used to be on the Hearthguard, and that was the ability that provided you a 4-up ward save for your Fyreslayers heroes that were within range they could bounce wounds and mortal wounds off a hero into this particular unit. There is no replacement rule on the War Scroll, so you've just flat out lost that rule. But that's not to say that in the updated battle tome, whenever that might be, that this rule might be on a War Scroll or within an Allegiance ability. Finally, you've got the Volkite Berserkers, and you'll notice that the War Scroll has been split into 2 distinct units. So in the past, it was one War Scroll for 2 different unit combinations. You could have the unit with double hand axe, or you could have the unit with the sling shields. Now, they are 2 completely different War Scrolls, and they have been pointed differently as well, which I'll talk about later in the video. So there are 2 different sets of profiles. Both units have the same movement, bravery, and wounds as the previous War Scrolls, but you'll notice that the sling shields now have a base save of 4+. It's not a +1 boost to the save roll, it is a flat 4-up save, which means they are still going to be able to benefit from Mystic Shield and all-out defense, and to be able to bring that armor save up to a 3-up. Like the rest of the units that I've already spoken about, the throwing axes are hitting on 4s and wounding on 4s. Both of the units still have the Berserk Fury, which once per battle allows that slain model to fight in combat before it's removed from the table. Now, the Volkite Berserkers with their hand axes have lost the Fire Steel hand axe ability, and that used to give you a reroll of hits in combat, but you do gain the Whirlwind of Destruction. So for the Volkite Berserkers with the double axes, they now get to add +1 to the attack characteristics in melee. Now, the condition with this, though, is that they must have made a charge move in the same turn. So should they charge, they will now be having 3 attacks on the profile instead of 2. The Bladed Sling Shield ability has been reworded as well, and the way it works now is that after the unit makes a charge move, you pick one enemy unit within 1 inch of this unit, and you roll 1 dice for each model in the unit. On a 6, it suffers a mortal wound. I think from memory, this unit was more generous. I think it was like a 6-inch range or a 3-inch range. It's now based on a 1-inch range to throw off those shields and generate a couple of mortal wounds before combat. Otherwise, everything else with the hand axes in melee hasn't changed. Your unit champions and the abilities for the horn have remained the same as well. Flipping the tide and looking at the Idoneth Deepkin, we do have the Akhelian Thrallmaster, and the lore behind them is that they are the outcast regal Akhelians, but they go on raids as the raider captains for the Namatis who are going out seeking those fresh souls on behalf of their enclaves. We start off by looking at a pretty standard foot hero based profile with a movement of 6, a save of 4, a bravery of 7, and a base wounds of 5. The Thrallmaster has no shooting attack, and it relies on 2 sets of attacks, one from the Thrallmaster's weapon, the other is from a familiar. The Esoteric Weapon is a range of 1 with 5 attacks, hits on 3s, wounds on 3s, rend 1 for 2 damage. The Familiar has a Vicious Bite, which has a 1-inch range as well, 2 attacks, hits on 3s, wounds on 4s, no rend, and it has 1 damage. Much like the Fyreslayer hero, you aren't taking the Thrallmaster for its combat prowess, but rather you are taking it for its ability to support your Namati warriors, and the ability you're looking into is his Akhelian fighting stance. The way the Akhelian fighting stance works is at the start of the combat phase, you pick one of 3 fighting stances, and that lasts until the end of the phase. So you're going to be able to flip these out in your turn and your opponent's turn. Now, there are 3 options to choose from. You can either re-roll hit rolls of 1 for attacks made by melee weapons by friendly Namati, as long as they're wholly within 12 inches of the Thrallmaster. The second ability allows you to have exploding 6s. So if in melee your unit rolls a 6 unmodified to hit, it's going to score 2 hits on the target instead of 1, and you go through the normal sequence of wound and save as normal. The last of the 3, and probably my favorite, is this ability to create a 12-inch bubble that is a -1 to wound for the Thrallmaster and friendly Namati units that are wholly within the bubble. So it's a little bit different to the Frostheart Phoenix, but if you think about how little abilities there are to give yourself a +1 or +2 to your wound roll, being able to draw that down with a -1 is a great ability, and why the Frostheart Phoenix for 5 or 6 years has stayed consistent in the competitive meta. So probably one of my personal favorites. Moving over to the Idoneth Deepkin troops, there are 3 war scrolls within the box, one for the Thralls, the Reavers, and the Alapex. Now, there's been one consistent change that you've been begging for since the dawn of time, and I better start off with the Namati Thralls. So put that bottle of hopium down, because the Thralls have finally got range of 2 inches. This is not a drill, folks. You finally got it. Your Thralls have range 2. Movement, save, and wounds characteristics remain the same on those Namati Thralls, but you do have a small boost to your bravery. So bravery has moved up to 7. I think it was 6 before. You're now at 7. While the range of the Lenari blades has increased to 2, there were no other changes to the profile in the hit, wounds, or rend. But there was a big change that I really liked in the sweeping blows ability. And the way it works now, when you target a model with a wounds characteristic of 3 or more, you get to add +1 to the damage to your melee, which is awesome because in the past that was a condition of wounds characteristic of 4 or more. Is now down to 3 or more. And for anyone who's worried about the sweeping blows against wounds characteristic of 1, nothing's changed there. So it's just the conditions have been reduced slightly. The Icon Bearer still gets +1 to the attack characteristic of themselves, but you have lost the reroll battle shock test. So, and that's consistent both for the Thralls and the Reavers. Speaking of Reavers, they saw similar changes with their move, save, and wounds characteristic remaining the same, but their bravery has gone up to 7. One of the big changes for the Reavers, which you may or may not like, I think there's probably more context to come with the Battle Tome, is that the Whisper Blow ability has been consolidated. So in the past, you used to have 2 different options. You could shoot with an armed fire or a storm fire. It is now just 1 attack profile. The Whisper Bow profile has a range of 18, has 2 attacks, hits on 3s, wounds on 3s, has rend 1 for 1. The shooting attack has generally improved all round. You've got a better to hit and to better wound profile than you used to have. You've gained rend. You've lost the option to 3 attacks at short range, but you've gained an ability called the Ripples of the Ether Sea, which adds +1 to the hit rolls for attacks made by those missile weapons if your target is within 9 inches of the attacking model. So it is attacking model, not the attacking unit. This is great because if your opponent is within 9 inches, you'll be hitting on 2s, or it will be a nice counter to the negatives that are applied with Unleash Hell. The other thing you probably should notice is that the Reavers have lost the Swift Tide ability, and that allowed them to re-roll their run rolls. There's no counter ability for them. They've just flat out lost Swift Tides. And much like the Namati Thralls, the Icon Bearer still gets their +1 attack in melee, but they don't get the re-rolls to their Battle Shock. You will also notice the Keening Blade profile has been slightly modified, and the attacks have gone down from 2 attacks to 1 attack, and the wound roll in combat for the Reavers is a 4 now instead of a 3. So it's a little bit harder in combat, but they've probably gotten a whole lot better in shooting. Finally, let's look at our Street Sharks, and the Alapexes have gained 2 wounds on their profile. So they've gone from 8 wounds base up to a 10 wounds base, which is awesome. Their move, their save, their bravery remains unchanged, and they are still not a monster, so they haven't regained the monster keyword. The Shark's missile and melee profile is consistent with Broken Realms Marathi, with the exception of the harpoon launcher that now does D3 damage instead of a flat 1. Now, some of the most exciting updates to the Alapexes, in my opinion, is if you decide to reinforce the Sharks to have 2 or more models, you will now gain access to a champion and new coherency rules. So the unit champion, so you must have 2 models in the unit. So if you just choose 1, you don't get a champion. But if there is 2 or more models in the unit, one becomes an Alpha Alapex, and the Alpha Alapex gets to add +1 to their hit rolls in melee, which is pretty sweet. I spoke about coherency, and there is an update to this Merciless Shiver, which essentially allows your Alapexes to be coherent within 3 inches rather than 1. So you might have seen this rule already in play with things like the Stormcast dragons, those little dragons. Now you have essentially the same rules, which means that you are going to be able to dominate more of the board. It means you can do some pinning. There's some nice shenanigans you can do when you have coherency of 3 with something that's good in combat and can hold its own, especially when it's got 10 wounds apiece. Bloodthirsty Predator rule has been improved by extending out the range to be 6 inches as opposed to, I think it used to be 3 inches. But the way it works now is that you'll gain +1 to the attack characteristic of the Ferocious Bites if your Sharks are within 6 inches of an enemy model that has either had wounds allocated to it, or if it's within 6 inches of an enemy unit that's had models slain in that turn. And finally, for those people who are not taking the harpoon launchers but are going for the nets and they're worried about their nets, the entangled rule remains the same. So you can restrict the pile-in abilities if you are scoring a hit roll on your nets. At the back of the Fury of the Deep booklet, there is a set of points for not only your new heroes to be used in match play and tournament, but also updated points for your new troops. Now, one of the most interesting point updates for me was the Volkite Berserker units, because as I mentioned, it is now split up into 2 profiles and they are pointed differently. The Hand Axe Volkite Berserkers are slightly cheaper than the Sling Shield, but which probably makes sense considering that Sling Shields now come with a base save of 4 as opposed to Hand Axes, which is a 5. Now, I'm reluctant to comment too much on the points ups and downs with the new Battle Tome likely to be coming, which will come with tweaks to allegiance abilities and war scrolls and potential other things that might change the context of what we've seen so far. But if I'm playing between now and whenever these battle tomes come out, I think the Flamekeeper is an absolute steal for 80 points. It's a good set of utility rules for units that I'm already taking, while with the Deepkin players, I guess the question is going to be, are you willing to drop your Eels and your Sharks to allow yourself points for your Nomati? And when I look at the Thrallmaster at 110 points, I think it is a worthy addition if you're going to take your Nomati. I think it's a good unit. The question is, are you going to drop Eels and Sharks and other options to create the space? So for anyone who is interested in the lore of this box, I'm not going to go too deep. If you're worried about spoilers, skip this part of the video, but I will share a little bit about the lore and how we got to this point where Fyreslayers and the Idoneth Deepkin are battling in this box. The Fury of the Deep story is set in Akshi, the Realm of Fire, and we are south of Hallowheart and Hammerhall and Tempest Eye, 3 of the grand cities of Sigmar, and we are south of the Great Parch in a city called Riftmar. And for centuries, the magma hold of Riftmar guarded the southern coast of the Brimstone Hearthland against the ravaging hordes of raiders and cannibals. And for anyone who might have read the Realmgate Wars, we are back in the realm of Akshi where Stormcast was fighting off Khorne. Powering the Forged Temple of Riftmar was this gigantic active submarine volcano, which was located at the bottom of the Victroll Sea, which was a vast, expansive, sizzling body of water which could strip the flesh and bones off a mortal within moments. The demise of Riftmar really began during the Great Flamewater Wars after a powerful Skaven engineer bore a hole into the Riftmar magma vaults using a bloody submarine drill. Now, while the Fyreslayers would go on to defeat the Skaven, it was that Warpstone drill did enough damage to destroy the foundations of the magma hold, which the Fyreslayers over centuries could never repair or replace, despite the great efforts of their Auric Forge priests. And it's really here that the story starts to kick in, with the Idoneth Deepkin Ironrack Enclave watching the demise of the Fyreslayers of Riftmar from afar. Attempt after attempt to repair this magma hole would continue to fail, and the Idoneth Deepkin knew that eventually the Vitrol Sea would erode and collapse this civilization. So, why not claim these high quality souls for themselves and appease the High King Volturnus? It is here that the story is set and you are offered some narrative battle plans and additional stories to explore. I was a little surprised to see Games Workshop release a Battle Force box that is mostly focused on foot troops in a meta that is currently focused on monster heroes. There are no magma droths in this box, there is no turtles, it is just foot troops, foot heroes, and a shark. I found it quite hard to form an opinion on the box because it also lacks the battle tome for a frame of context, because on a surface level, the heroes are good value, the Deepkin war scrolls have been improved, the Fyreslayers units seem to have lost a little bit of their durability outside of the improvements to things like the sling shield saves. It's fair to assume that there is a new battle tome coming for 3rd edition, but the big question that we've all got is when. Will the Fyreslayers have faction-wide ward saves? How will the Deepkin tides change? Will there be boosts in the sub-factions that will supercharge the Thralls even further than the Thrallmaster? Using the new rules with the old battle tomes, I could see Deepkin players are currently happy with what they've got and are probably very likely to try off some of the new Namadi units, while Fyreslayers are probably feeling like they've lost more than they've gained. If you're a casual player or looking to start collecting these miniatures, this is a good start collecting box for you. You're probably not too worried about the competitive level and what it brings to match play. If I'm a competitive player looking to buy this box, I'm buying it because I want the models, and I've always wanted to start a Fyreslayers or a Deepkin army, or maybe I've already got the eels, the turtles, and the sharks, and I need to buy more troops. So this is a good value, save some money, get access to a new hero before general release, and I'm feeling optimistic with the changes to the war scroll that a future battle tome will only enhance my foot troops with battalions and sub-factions and other 3rd edition rules. But if I'm sitting on the fence, maybe I'm waiting a little bit longer to see what is more coming out. But I think overall, if I'm looking at a box that I want some troops and I want access to some heroes, this is good. If I'm looking for someone who wants to get in front of the meta, maybe I'm waiting for the battle tome to kind of be released. But hey, I don't play either of these factions. And if I was going to play one of the factions, it would be Deepkin, and it would be more for the eels, the sharks, the turtles, and more of those monsters. But I'd be really curious to hear from you in the comment section what you think about this box. Is this, are you happy about some of the changes that have come in from the war scrolls? Would you find some space in your army to include the Flamekeeper or the Thrallmaster? Let me know what you're thinking in the comment section. Always curious to hear from you. Thanks for sticking around until the end. I hope you found that video interesting and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would appreciate it if you hit like on the video, as well as left me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. The conversation will continue over on Discord, so link is down below in the episode description if you want to join the Discord and continue the Age of Sigmar conversation. I want to give a massive shout out as well to these absolute bloody legends, these champions who have continued to support me through Patreon or YouTube members. That is going directly into supporting the maintenance and the growth of this channel. So thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. And until next time, roll more fixels.